Hey guys, it's Elliot with Backyard Sports Media, and today we're going to be taking a look at the top free agents of the 2025 draft class, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And I just wanted to bring you guys some potential team fits for these guys, projected contracts, and I'll give you my predictions as to where I think they will end up signing. So, first up, we got T. Higgins here, and of course, I think everybody knows the story by now. Was slated to hit free agency last offseason. Bengals ended up using the franchise tag on him. He held out for a little while, wanted to get a long term contract extension before playing again, was not able to get that done, did choose to play this year despite not having the extension done. Had a good season when he was on the field, but that was kind of the issue. Had some injuries here and there and couldn't stay on the field for the entire season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens looking forward for him. I think he can be a wide receiver one for a lot of teams in the NFL. He hasn't had to do that in his career, other than maybe when he was a rookie. But even then, you had Tyler Boyd, and that year was kind of a wash anyway. Joe Burrow getting injured, and so not having a very good year that year as a franchise. But really, Higgins' whole career, he's had to play second fiddle to Jamar Chase. But I and most others around the league think that he can be a wide receiver one on a team that doesn't have, a Jamar Chase or another guy that is their wide receiver one. So it'll be really interesting to see how teams approach him. Do some teams view him as purely a wide receiver two? Maybe, but like I said, I do think most teams will look at him as a wide receiver one. He's got the size for it, he's got the athleticism, and he has shown when Jamar Chase has been hurt, he's shown that he can play at a high level as your wide receiver one. So looking at on the screen here, we got the projected contract. These numbers are from PFF. So you got projected 4 years, 112 million, which is 28 million per year, and then 67 and a half of that being guaranteed. And I honestly think we could see that being a little bit higher. I think if it wasn't for the injury, I think he definitely would have been over 30 million. I think the injury may deter him a little bit. Hopefully not for his sake, but I truly think, like, based off of some of the other contracts that these receivers have gotten, I think Higgins could certainly get 30 million per year. Now, I don't think he's a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson. Like, I don't think he should be getting like 35 million. I don't think he should be the highest paid receiver, but looking at some of these other guys who are making 30 million per year or high 20s, I think he definitely deserves 30 million per year. Like I said, I think he can be a wide receiver one for any team in the NFL that doesn't already have one. So looking at some potential team fits here, I've got the Bengals listed down, of course. Like, it makes sense for him to want to stay if they can meet the type of money that he is wanting. I think he's shown that he's going to have a ton of success in that offense. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And, for him, maybe he wants to be a wide receiver one, but I think he's okay with being second fiddle as long as it's to a guy like Jamar Chase. And I think he really enjoys playing with Joe Burrow. They've got great chemistry together, and I think he'll definitely want to stay in Cincinnati, but it's all about, can they get to a number that makes him want to stay? Money is extremely important, and I don't know that the Bengals will be able to reach the number that he's looking for, this 28 million a year. I don't know if they'll be able to get that. And like I said, I think some teams like Patriots and some other teams that really need a receiver that have a lot of money to spend, I think they could be offering Higgins upwards of 30 million per year. So it'll be hard for the Bengals to match that. Bengals have to pay the other receiver, the aforementioned Jamar Chase. He is not a pending free agent, but he is eligible for an extension, and they will have to get an extension done with him this offseason. They talked about getting one done last offseason, but the Bengals don't usually do extensions that early. So they did not get one done, but they will have to get one done this offseason with Chase. If they don't, then he won't step on the field. He's a good enough player. He's got enough leverage that he will get one done or he will be traded out of there, which I think they will get one done. He's too good of a receiver to let walk. So it'd be interesting to see what that means for Higgins. Hendrickson as well, on the defensive side of the ball for the Bengals is due for an extension. And so the Bengals, they have some cap space, but do they have enough to get all of their guys back? It's going to be really, really hard to tell, especially when the offensive line needs a lot of work. The defensive side of the ball was horrible last year and needs help at all three levels. Like I said, first things first being re-sign Trey Hendrickson, but it's going to be really interesting. I think in an ideal world, of course, T. Higgins is back in Cincinnati, but I just don't know how that's going to play out. It's been, kind of up and down. At the start of the year, there was seemingly no way he was going to re-sign in Cincinnati. They just didn't have the money. That was not going to happen. And then Joe Burrow comes out and says, "I absolutely want him re-signed. I need him re-signed. We need him on this team if we want to be successful long term." And of course, when your franchise quarterback is saying anything about other players on the roster, you have to listen and you have to give that a lot of thought and consideration. But I think knowing the Bengals ownership, knowing that generally they're a little bit on the cheaper side historically, I think they will let him walk. I don't see a way that they can keep him. I think if they try to franchise tag him again, maybe that's a possibility, but I think he holds out again, and I think he probably would stick to it this time and not play. And maybe you could franchise tag him and trade him. That might be an ideal situation for Cincinnati. It's hard to really say at this point, but I think he will be somewhere other than Cincinnati at the start of the 2025 season. And in terms of my prediction, I'm going to lean Washington here. I think, of course, New England has been the obvious fit that's been talked about for a long time. They have the most money in free agency and they desperately need receiver help for Drake May. But I think Higgins is not going to want to go from such a step down in terms of team play. He's used to being on the Bengals, compete. Of course, they missed the playoffs this year, but he's used to competing, winning games, being in the playoffs, trying to compete for a Super Bowl. I don't think he's going to want to take a step down in New England and think more towards long term. I think he wants to try to win. He is young, so he has a lot of time, but I think he's a super competitive guy. He's going to want to win. He's not going to want to take such a huge step down in terms of how good the team is. So I look at Washington, who also has a ton of money, despite just making the NFC Championship this past year. So they're a really exciting team to look forward towards the future. They could really use a receiver to pair alongside Terry McLaurin. If they add T. Higgins, I mean, this offense was already really scary with Jaden Daniels as a rookie. Imagine Daniels in his second year with T. Higgins and Terry McLaurin, the running backs they got. Wow. I mean, that would be an extremely scary offense. I think ultimately that's where he's going to end up, despite New England throwing him a lot of money. I think he will sign with the Commanders for less, and that is where he will end up at the start of the 2025 season. Next free agent on the list, we're looking at the trenches. We're looking at guard Trey Smith for the Kansas City Chiefs. Projected contract here from PFF is 4 years, 82 million, 20 and a half per year, 50 million of that being guaranteed. And some of the team fits I've got here is the Chicago Bears, Tennessee Titans, and the Los Angeles Chargers. Trey Smith is an interesting one. I think I didn't list the Chiefs here, but he could, of course, stay with the Chiefs. That's definitely a possibility. But I think when you look at their roster and where their money's allocated and the guys that they are going to need to pay going forward in the future, namely George Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie, and some of the other guys on that roster, I think it'll be really tough for them to pay a guy like Trey Smith. They also have to pay his running mate, their center, Creed Humphrey, who has been maybe the best center in the league since he's been drafted. And Trey Smith's been one of the best guards in the league. And so it's really hard to let a guy like that walk. But I don't know that they have much of a choice when you look at their roster and you see some of the more valuable positions. Like I said, Karlaftis playing DN, McDuffie playing corner. It'll be really tough to try to find the money to sign a guy like Trey Smith. So I think he will end up elsewhere. I think he'll be able to get more money from a lot of these other teams. That's for sure. Now, could he take a discount and stay in Kansas City? That is certainly a possibility. He's a guy who's already got 2 Super Bowls now, I believe. I think he was drafted in 2020 or 2021. Um, and as of recording, this is the week before the Super Bowl. Maybe he'll have his third before he even hits free agency. So he could certainly take a hometown discount and stay in Kansas City. But I think he will look to get the most money possible, try to get a payday in the prime of his career, look elsewhere. And I think these other teams, mainly the teams I have listed, will be able to offer him the most money. But really, I mean, he will be sought after by a lot of teams. Every team needs offensive line help. He's a guard, but I'm sure, if there's teams that wanted to try him out at different positions, they might be willing to, or maybe they sign him at guard and they move one of their own guards up to tackle, something like that. He'll definitely be a highly sought after guy on the free agent market. The most, paired team fit I've seen so far is the Chicago Bears. I think that makes a ton of sense. They have a desperate need on the interior of their offensive line. Their tackles have been solid, but it's mainly just been the interior that's really let them down. They need better guard play, they need better center play. And so Trey Smith would make a lot of sense, help keep Caleb Williams upright for the future, not let him get sacked nearly as often as he did his rookie year, and hopefully be able to build a better foundation for the Bears offense for years to come. You look at Tennessee, don't have their quarterback in place, but even whether you do or don't have your quarterback in place, upgrading the O line is always a huge help. It'll help the run game, which in turn helps whoever the quarterback is. It'll help in the passing game. It'll help whoever's under center feel more confident and comfortable. And so whether that's Will Levis, whether that's Cam Wardshire Sanders at the top of the draft, whether that's a veteran like a Sam Darnold, whoever it might be, Trey Smith would make a ton of sense for Tennessee. And he is actually a University of Tennessee alumni, so he'd be returning to his home state. He was born and raised there, grew up there, so it would make a ton of sense for him to return there. And I've got the division rival Chargers on here as well. They have a lot of money to spend in free agency, and kind of like the Bears, their tackle play this past season was really good. Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, maybe the best tackle duo in the league, but the interior of the Chargers offensive line was very poor, led to Herbert getting sacked quite a bit. They could not deal with interior pressure from opposing D tackles very well at all. Really, really struggled on stunts. Bigger guys working in the middle of that defense, they just really struggled. And you saw what happened, especially later on in the year when they started to face some better defensive lines. Herbert just was not able to have enough time to get the ball out. So I think a guy like Trey Smith would be really nice for the Chargers, and of course, added bonus to them because they'd be stealing him away from a division rival, and that's always really nice to do at the NFL level. Teams always really try to poach division rivals players away because, like I said, not only are you getting a good player, but you're taking away a good player from a team you are playing twice a year. So I think looking at these teams, looking at the potential team fits, like I said, barring him taking a hometown discount and staying in Kansas City, I think it will be one of these three teams. And I think he'll end up going to Tennessee. I think, the not having a quarterback situation might deter him a little bit. But like I said, he was born and raised in Tennessee, no state income tax there. I think they will be able to offer him a ton of money. Still pretty nice weather, probably better weather than Kansas City. So I think he'll end up signing there. Like I said, going back to his home state and being able to immediately upgrade that offensive line alongside Peter Skoronski and some of their other offensive linemen. And no matter who's under center for them for the future, their offensive line would be a lot better with a guy like Trey Smith. Next free agent up on the list we have is Chris Godwin. Projected contract from PFF is 3 years, 60 million, 20 million per year, 40 of that being guaranteed. Some team fits I have here are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Denver Broncos, and the New England Patriots. And Chris Godwin is an interesting one. He's another one that's, remarkably similar to T. Higgins, a guy who went on the field this year, was playing some really good football, but of course injuries ended up derailing the season. He was a little bit different than Higgins. Higgins had some lingering things that just kind of went on here and there and missed some games. Godwin, of course, just had the one big injury in the Ravens game. They were trying to come back and win that game, ended up losing probably too late in that game to even make a comeback happen, but they were still trying to push the ball down the field and win that game. And Godwin gets hurt and, of course, is done for the rest of the year at that point. So it'll be really interesting to see how that impacts his free agency market. PFF, based off of this projected contract, seems to think probably won't impact it a whole lot. 20 million, quite a bit for a guy coming off of a season-ending injury in the latter stages of his career. Um, and pretty cemented wide receiver two at this point. I think it's pretty well known that Godwin's not going to be a wide receiver one. I think he and T Higgins differ in that way. Higgins I think has shown that he can be a wide receiver one, even though he hasn't had to be. Godwin I think has shown that he's more of a wide receiver two at this point. Now he's probably one of the best wide receiver twos in this league, but I do think he's a wide receiver two at this point. I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver one for too many teams other than maybe the New England Patriots. And that's more so just because they have no help at receiver, really nobody there who can make much of an impact. So I think he would step into that offense and be the wide receiver one. But I think other than that, he's probably more of a wide receiver two. You look at the team fits here. I've got Denver on here. I think they need to get more help at receiver. Get Bo Nix, another playmaker. I think Godwin would be a really fun fit in that offense. Play him at the Z, Cortland Sutton at the X. Get some of those younger guys they have and rotate them through the slot. Get Godwin in the slot sometimes. That would be a really, really fun offense. I know Sean Payton really respects Chris Godwin, from Payton's time in New Orleans, playing against Godwin twice a year. I know he really respects him, know how great of a player he is. So that would be a really fun fit in that offense. I know Bo Nix would really appreciate that. And the Broncos have some money to play around with now that some of that dead cap money from the Russell Wilson deal is finally starting to go away. So that'd be a really interesting fit. I would personally love to see that. And of course, you got the New England Patriots here. I think they'll probably be in the market for every receiver who hits free agency. They are desperate need of help. They have a lot of money to throw around, which will certainly help them be able to hopefully sign at least one of these guys. And Godwin is a little bit of an interesting one, more interesting than maybe some other receivers. He's actually a Northeast guy. He's from Delaware, so he could go back up to the Northeast. He played at Penn State, not too far away, so be really interesting to see him back up there, in his home area. So he's used to the cold. That's not going to bother him too much. But who knows? He's been playing in Tampa Bay for all these years. He might have got used to it by now. So he might not want to go back to the cold. And of course, I've got Tampa Bay on here as well. And Tampa Bay, I think for a guy like Godwin, he's been there so long. I think it makes the most sense for him to stay in Tampa Bay, stay playing alongside Mike Evans. He's built up a really good rapport with Baker Mayfield, and he's shown that he can be a consistent receiver for Mayfield. They've been on the same page their entire time together. And I think, Godwin will want to stay there. He's seems to be really well loved by the fans in Tampa Bay, and they have some money to be able to, make him one of the higher paid wide receiver twos in this league, behind probably only like Jalen Waddle of the Dolphins. And so I think Godwin staying in Tampa Bay probably makes the most sense. But New England, of course, one to keep an eye on since he's from the Northeast, and they will be able to offer him a lot of money. Last free agent we're going to talk about today is maybe the most interesting one, Sam Darnold, quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. Projected contract from PFF, 3 years, 123 million, comes out to 41 per year, 70 million of that being guaranteed. Some potential team fits I've got are the Raiders, the Vikings, and the Titans. And Darnold is such an interesting one. Signed a 1-year deal last offseason in Minnesota after spending some time as the backup in San Francisco. Was mainly thought of as, hey, this is just going to be our bridge quarterback. He's going to play maybe for a year or two, and then we're going to hand over the keys to JJ McCarthy, who we drafted with the 10th overall pick. But then Sam Darnold goes out there and leads your team to a 14-3 record. JJ McCarthy, of course, gets hurt in the preseason. But I think even if he hadn't gotten hurt, McCarthy was not going to step foot on the field this year with the way Darnold played and the way the team played. And so now you're in the boat of, okay, do you go with the young guy? Do you stick with Darnold? Because, the young guy's going to be cheaper, but he's a question mark. He's an unknown. We don't know what he's going to be at the NFL level. And I think Darnold would be almost a slam dunk to stay in Minnesota, despite all of that. But those last two games of the regular season, last game of the regular season, and then postseason, I think probably really left a sour taste in a lot of Vikings fans' mouths. Maybe Kevin O'Connell, the ownership, GM, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. It's going to be interesting to see how they weigh those last two performances of Darnold versus the rest of the body of work he provided this season. When the lights shine the brightest, Week 18, Detroit, division on the line, first seed on the line, first round bye on the line. Darnold just did not play well. I know the offensive line also did not play well. He had no time to throw, seemingly, but even despite the poor offensive line, he also just did not play well in that game. Ended up losing that game. Then you look at for wild card game against the Rams, same thing, just did not have a lot of time to throw, yes, but at the same time, I think you can say he did not play well either. The offensive line didn't help him out, but he also did not help that offensive line out either. And I think those things need to go hand in hand. And for him to have his two worst performances of the season in the two biggest games really throws a wrench into things. Like I said, I think if it wasn't for those two performances, he'd be a slam dunk to stay on the Vikings. I think he'd be $50 million per year guy. If the Vikings wouldn't give him that money, he'd definitely get it from somewhere else. And so I think those last two games definitely hurt his value on the open market. It'll be interesting to see how much teams pay for him. I think despite all of that, I think teams will give him a lot more money than what maybe people think. I think the baseline for him is that Daniel Jones extension from what was 2 years ago from the Giants, about 40 million per year. I think that's a baseline. I think that's a minimum for Darnold. I think he gets no less than that, no matter what team he signs with. So I think these teams, the Raiders, the Titans, the Giants, the Jets, these teams will be so quarterback needy. They are going to offer him more money than maybe what he deserves. But that's what happens with the quarterback position at the NFL level. It's so valuable. Teams overdraft it. They pay more money than they should for it. But that's just the nature of the beast. That's how things work at the NFL level. You see guys like Trevor Lawrence get $55 million per year when they haven't really proved anything at the NFL level. You see guys like Dak Prescott getting $60 million per year, who I think Dak's a great player. $60 million a year is a lot of money. And he's not the best quarterback in the league. He's not even a top 5, maybe not even a top 10 quarterback in this league, getting $60 million per year. But That's how it works. I don't see it changing. Teams are going to continue drafting these guys really highly. They're going to continue paying them a lot of money. And so usually these guys don't hit free agency for that reason, so valuable. But Darnold is, because like I said, a little bit of a unique set of circumstances. Could still be franchise tagged by the Vikings. I think that's a really interesting outcome here. I think that would be the ideal situation for the Vikings. Of course, would not be ideal for Darnold. He wants to cash in, get a long term deal, get as much guaranteed money as he possibly can. But franchise tag, while it's only 1 year of guaranteed money, you still become one of the higher paid players at the position. And I believe, I don't know the exact numbers for the franchise tag for the quarterback position this offseason, so excuse me, but it's definitely upwards of 50 million. It's an average of the top 5 highest paid players of the position. And of course, all the highest paid quarterbacks at this day and age are above 50 million. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Darnold. I mean, getting 50 plus million guaranteed, but he definitely would want a longer term deal, a little bit more stability. So it'll be interesting to see, do the Vikings give that to him? Do they roll the dice and turn the keys over to JJ McCarthy, despite the fact that he's not played a snap of regular season football? He did look good in the preseason. Rumors were that he looked really good in training camp, but that can be misleading, and who knows if that's real? Who knows if that's the team just trying to boost him up and make him feel better? Like, it's really hard to say. And it's going to be a really interesting situation. I think teams, like I said, the quarterback needy teams are going to offer him more money than Minnesota. I think that's virtually a guarantee. The question now is, how does Darnold approach this free agency? Does he want to just get the most money, get a payday while he's seemingly in the prime of his career? He's never going to see this type of money probably ever again, unless he just continues to play really, really well. Then maybe he could get another contract after this one. But it's going to be really interesting. Or does he try to stay in Minnesota, take a pay cut, be in a place where he knows the offense, he knows the weapons around him, he has rapport with these guys, he knows he can have success? It's going to be really interesting. I think Darnold, knowing the way he's going to approach things, knowing how things just did not work out in New York when he was drafted to the Jets, how things did not work out in Carolina, then what he learned as the backup in San Francisco, I think he is going to try to stay in Minnesota. I think he knows he's going to have by far the most success in Minnesota. He's not going to be able to replicate that in some of these other places that don't have as good of receivers, don't have as good of running backs, tight ends, offensive lines, defenses. I think he's going to want to stay in Minnesota, maybe on slightly less money than he does get offered on the open market. But I think, like I said, this contract from PFF, I think, is kind of through the lens of him staying in Minnesota. 3 years, only about half of the contract being guaranteed. I think if he does end up signing elsewhere, it's going to be probably 4 or 5 year deal with more than 41 per year, more than 70 million guaranteed. But I think this PFF projection is, like I said, more through the lens of him staying in Minnesota, which is what I think he will do. That's the smartest decision for his career. And I think that'll help the Vikings have success and maybe be able to turn over the keys to McCarthy a little bit later whenever, he's still an unknown commodity coming off of an Achilles tear at this point as well. So definitely something to consider with that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video today. If you did, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the comments letting me know what you guys think of where these free agents will sign or any other big moves that you think might happen during the offseason. Like I said, hopefully you guys enjoy this video. Have a good one. Peace.